The secret sauce to the 40k universe is that nobody gives a fuck about their soldiers at all, so they'll just keep coming.
And chaos will clog them with zombies.
Right.
Yep. Oh, and cultists. I mean, they don't care.
Yeah, it's like, no. Whatever army you're going up against, they will eventually win because they will just attrition you to death.
Necrons will just clog you with the same Necrons over and over again.
Right.
Gosh, I still remember my battle of the Deathwing Knights versus the Lich Guard.
That game's still going, I think.
No, it ended after the 5 turns, but I mean, I killed about 30 of his squad of 5.
Yep, that tracks.
Yeah.
Welcome to Preferred Enemies, the Warhammer 40k podcast that is definitely not the poster boys of Warhammer 40k. I'm your host, Rob.
Kevin.
Dennis?
And Richard.
And yes, as I mentioned a couple episodes ago, we are starting our faction focus series to kind of break down from, kind of a base level, the various factions in Warhammer 40k. So whether you are a new player or you are a returning player needing a refresher of where things are now, or just kind of interested in like what is the landscape of 40k, we are going to kick it off this episode with Space Marines. Now, you might say Space Marines, well, are we just going to do one faction per episode? Like, no. We're going to do multiple factions per episode. We're going to try to get this covered in like 4 episodes. It's just that there are so many flavors of Imperial Space Marines. And this episode won't even cover all of them. We are just covering the ones that can be made with the Space Marine Codex. And we'll be getting into that in a bit. But first, now that we're all together again, which it's good to have all of you here.
Yeah,
it's nice to be all back together. I did want to talk a little bit about something you guys got to see that Kevin, you and Dennis got to see in person. And that is the preview from the World Championships / Grand Narrative. And boy, our experience of watching it was way different than yours. Way, way worse. So bad.
It was fun in the room.
I'm glad listening to your coverage of it and talking about how there were crowd pops and people were reacting to things. It was way different than what we got, because obviously, like you said, there were sound issues that got better.
Yeah.
It was unlistenable at certain points. Like it was like the videos they played were okay, but the banter on the mics was unlistenable for a good chunk of it.
That's probably because the mics were live in the room and they were trying to subdue all the crowd noise because they were picking up a lot of it. So I guess they did a great job of subduing the crowd noise, but also kind of subdued the
It wasn't even just that it was subdued. It was breaking apart. The stream dropped at least twice. It was it was not great. And of course there was about like 10 minutes in, we're gonna have to pause for like 10-15 minutes because
we were in the room for that because that's when they were telling stories to us.
Andy started doing Eddie and Andy just started doing like crowd work for a few minutes. I think I said this on the Grand Narrative episode. I applaud that they are at least trying new things and looking at different ways to present this. It really sucks that it was a bad like live show. I have not gone back and watched the video because I've heard it so bad that I'm like, I just don't need to.
Yeah, it was a painful experience. And I think, you mentioned that like there were crowd reactions. What really didn't play well on the stream was then they're like, hey, is anybody excited for Blood Bowl or Age of Sigmar or Darkwater? And all we would hear from those of us watching at home, silence. And it's like, oh, dead air. That's not great. That sounds real bad. Sounds like to us it sounded like the crowd was just dead.
Yeah.
No, it was not dead. It was just it's not getting broadcast.
No, it was not getting broadcast. So it was a rough experience. But in the end there were some neat previews though. Although on their website currently the links to a few of them are broken, so I had to find information on other sites.
Yeah, I was actually trying to go back and do all that, and they're all currently broken right now because I can't pull any of them up. I will say this: if nothing else, this is another incentive, a reason to just go to the grand narrative for people. I don't know.
That's a big financial ask just to be able to watch the preview without it absolutely.
I mean, there are other benefits.
I'm sure there are.
An additional one. We'll put it that way.
Okay,
I'm trying to upsell this.
I definitely want to go. It's just that, that was yeah. Anyway, so first off, let's talk about the smaller releases of this, and that is we've got 3 factions getting new characters. We get a Chthonian Berserk character finally.
Oh my, I'm excited for that. I'm sad in a way that he's probably going to be an epic hero, meaning...
Yeah. Oh, he's absolutely going to be.
I'm hoping he's like Uthar, where he can be an epic hero or a generic one, but I'm guessing he'll just be the epic hero.
Yeah.
He's got his tactical rock and his severed orc head with spine hanging out of it still from the look of it.
I do like that.
But yeah, Barrack Stormbrow. It's a nice looking Chthonian. It's nice to finally have a Chthonian character, even if it is going to be a named character. And then speaking of other named characters, we get the Twin Lance for the Tau.
They look so interesting.
They do look neat. The suits have a different style mark, which it's similar to Farsight's, but not exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The shields look interesting. I don't know how I feel about the little cutaways on some of the armor panels to show like gold under armor. That just feels like it's going to be unfun to paint, but
fair. I didn't think of it that way, but GW has been putting so much more little details in things that it is getting harder to.
Yeah. But they do look cool. Also kind of amused that they are the 2 survivors of a triad polycule apparently. But we stand our poly Tau heroes, I suppose. But interesting weapon assortment because we've got like a fusion eliminator and an ion scatter gun. So these are going to be close. I know these are supposed to be Montka fighters. These are like, well, we can't use Farsight anymore in the Empire, so I suppose we'll have to replace him with someone else.
These kind of remind me actually of the I don't think they sell them anymore, but the XV9 suits that they used to sell on Forge World, which were specifically like the short range close fighters that had like dual burst cannons, dual melta guns, and I think dual plasma guns. These kind of remind me of like a modification and like upscale, slightly different armor design, things like that, but like a very similar battlefield role as those, which is cool. I like those battle suits.
Yeah, no, I do like the look of these. I find it interesting that they've said these, because I think they mentioned in the stream, they don't have it in the article, but they do mention in the stream that these have their own color scheme. They are not meant to, like, they have unique heraldry, basically.
Yeah, they're not part of any specific subfaction. They are heroes of the Empire, kind of like how Shadow Sun works, where she can just kind of jump in anywhere. And I like that they're doing that more with epic heroes, where they can just slot into an army and not break things.
Yeah, I think they're doing that more and more because Eldar with the Phoenix Swords have always been like that, but Eldrad was locked, but now he's not. In the Votann, Uthar and Buri have story reasons why they can pop into whatever faction, and so I'm hoping the new Chthonian Berserker leader has the same, where he's not a single faction, he's just probably a lone warrior looking for a fight, I guess.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's not a lone warrior. Hopefully he can join a unit.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, most factions are getting away from the we are color locked, and when I say that, it's like if your army is not painted a certain color scheme, you can't use this unit. We will be talking about the one faction where that's still a thing.
I was going to say, awkward segue.
But they are, in general, they have been moving away from that for other factions. And then we've got he's not exactly named, he's not exactly unique, but the Tyranids did get a Tyranid Prime with Lash Whip.
Yes, finally. Like something to go with Tyranid Primes that isn't a winged one that they can't keep up with.
Right. Yeah, nice to finally have that. I don't know if the pose looks kind of awkward.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not bad. It's just There's just something about he looks a little goofy with the way his tongue is, like the angle his head's at and the way his tongue is out, but like it's very dynamic. So I don't hate it. It's just like, oh, that's choice. But yeah, it's good to have a character model that they used to have and then they got rid of, and now they've decided to put it back. So yeah, having a Foot Prime is long overdue.
Yeah.
And then as far as the other models, the other big things they announced for 40K, and this will also be a segue into what we're talking about, is, hey, we're getting more Ultramarines.
Woo!
Because
They
it's
look
been
amazing.
They do look really good, and it's been what, 2 months? the video. It's been 2 months since we've had a Marnius Calgar model. 2 whole months.
I will say this though, like I am as tired as anybody else for all of the Ultramarine characters. However, getting Captain Titus and like lore around that and like a campaign, I'm perfectly fine with this. The models look amazing. They're taking advantage of the single biggest pop culture thing that 40K has done in the last 30 years. So yeah, no, I'm all for this.
Yeah, and not just bringing in stuff from Space Marine 2, but also from the secret level animation they did, because they brought in veteran Sergeant Mataris, who was his sergeant when he was still up and coming. They've got Gadriel from Space Marine 2. Sadly, Chiron and Captain Acheron do not exist anymore. They were eaten. They sacrificed themselves to stop Tyranids.
I don't remember who it was somebody on Discord like photoshopped in like the Ultramarine battle casualties and put them at the feet and like, see, he's in here.
Oh.
Too soon, man. Too soon.
But yeah, we're getting a Captain Titus like set that includes Gadriel, Mataris, and then several like non-Space Marine characters who are involved in the defense of Ultramar. So like we're just getting some of the Auxilia, which is cool.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they're also going to be facing off against Necrons and the new Necrosaur Amintar, who may be the character that created the Destroyer Curse that has been making Necrons go insane. Is got a new model, or got a model. He didn't exist before, so he's got a model, and he looks terrifying appropriately.
I love non-humanoid Tyranid models. Like, I really wish they would lean more into that design aesthetic. So, very cool.
I mean, non-human Necron models?
Yeah, non-humanoid Necron models. Like,
so you said Tyranid, so.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, non-humanoid. Well, no, also non-humanoid Tyranid models.
Those are also
non-humanoid.
Good, yes.
Non-humanoid Necron models just look so cool and like otherworldly, and like like this and like Saris and Wraiths like that. Like just these models are really cool, and I think really show where Necrons can go, which opens up some really fun possibilities.
And then we've also got the new Shard of the Nightbringer, which had been leaked before. We knew that was coming, but also how they're working it into the storyline is great. In that Necrosaur Amintar is decided that what he needs to do to wipe out all biological life in the universe is to collect all the shards of the Nightbringer and bring back the full-powered Catan, the Nightbringer. Which nothing bad could come of anyone. Yeah, there's nothing bad could come of this. And then they're also getting a battalion box, which is all destroyers of every variety. Scorpex, Ophidians, Locust Heavies.
Dig it.
Which I don't need to be tempted into a new army, and yet here we are. I already have like multiple projects that are coming up.
You've heard me go in with the new box for this year, so I will be starting Emperor's Children next year. So yeah. I'm doing a new army.
See, I'm already like, I've got the Trader Guard project, which is kind of a long-term project.
Oh, that's true.
But I was also going through like all my back stock of like leftovers from box sets and things where like I've put together some of the models, but not all of them. And I figured out I can build like 1,000-point Deathwatch army just with what I already own. I'm probably gonna. So I don't need to be tempted to play Necrons also.
Then don't.
So all of this is going to come together in the 500 Worlds campaign, which basically, because Titus, who was a captain and then got busted down to the Death Watch because he felt he had dishonored his chapter, and then he rejoined as a Primaris lieutenant, and now he's been promoted back to captain of the second company. He's in charge. He's basically defender of Ultramar, and thus he has been tasked by Robuta Gilliman to take back the 500 worlds of Ultramar, which is an impossible task. It is literally impossible to do, but he's like, and even, I like the trailer they had for it where he's like, yeah, Gilliman is out of touch. He's a demigod from another time, and I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but I guess I gotta try to do it. Okay.
Well, back in Bobby G's day, that's what they did. They just raised an army, go conquered a bunch of worlds.
Arbiter Ian has a really great video that he just put out about the history of the 500 worlds. So that's really good, like background lore about like the history of the Ultramar segments, area and stuff like that. So I highly recommend if you want to learn more about that.
Yeah. And then, we're getting a slipcase book of 500 Worlds Titus, which is basically going to be like a narrative campaign with like a large map that you fight over and new missions, new detachments. And this is definitely going to be the event that will lead us into the next edition. There's no way that it's not.
Right.
I am finally glad that Ultramarines are getting some love, though. Like, they've been starved for attention.
Right. I mean, they weren't the army
Year
in the
of chaos.
lunchbox. Oh, wait. Yes.
The year of chaos.
For extremely specific values of a year.
It wouldn't be a Chaos Marine player if I wasn't complaining about chaos models. So, anyway.
This is true. There are standards to maintain, sir.
Maybe that's your next project, Kevin. You get a bunch of Ultramarines and chaosify them.
Nah, that seems too plain.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that is the segue that leads us into our main topic, which is faction-focused Space Marines. So if, let's say, you are coming into this and you know very little about 40K, you know very little about Space Marines. Maybe you've seen the game Space Marine 2, or you've watched the secret level video, or you're aware of what a Space Marine looks like. But what is a Space Marine? Is a Space Marine just a regular dude in robot armor? No, it's something very different. So this will not be a deep dive into lore. We are going to try to keep this as kind of focused and brief. Again, as Kevin, you just mentioned Arbiter Ian. Arbiter Ian is like one of the top lore masters as far as like doing videos for 40K. And if you want deep dives, in fact, he's done deep dives into like all the original Space Marine legions and into a lot of individual chapters. And we'll be telling you what those terms mean as well. But definitely recommend checking out Arbiter Ian's videos. And in fact, he just did a video for IGN about the Horus Heresy, like people asking questions about the Horus Heresy as well.
Well, and then also like in the background of like the Horus Heresy and the Unification Wars, there are literally 60 plus novels that Black Library has written. So we're just going to lightly touch on a lot of this. There is so much more that you can get into.
Right. So back in the early days, the pre-Imperium days, the Emperor came into being, or perhaps had been around the whole time, and decided it was time to unite humanity and take them into the stars. But first he had to unify Earth, and to do that, he created genetically engineered soldiers. And I want to say the Custodes were technically the first, because he had Custodes around before he had anything else. But every Custodes is like a bespoke, genetically modified warrior. They're not really able to be mass produced. And he needed mass forces to be able to conquer the rest of Earth. And so he started off with the kind of the proto-Space Marines, the Thunder Warriors. And that plan worked pretty well. He was able to use the Thunder Warriors to take over the rest of the planet, and then basically had the Custodes eliminate them, if I remember right.
Yeah. It turns out that in the grim darkness techno-fascist future of 40K, everybody is bad.
Yes.
Who knew?
But now that he had the planet, he had Terra under his control, it's like, okay, now it's time to launch a great crusade into the galaxy and both reconnect with the lost pockets of humanity who had left during the dark age of technology and beforehand, and who had were scattered across the universe, bring them back into the fold, take over any planets that have been taken over by other threats to humanity, and unite everything into one big galactic imperium. And to do this, he was going to need a new set of bioengineered super soldiers. And so that's when the first Space Marines were developed, the Adeptus Astartes, his Angels of Death. And he basically had 20 genetic blueprints for various Space Marines. All of them are pretty much the same, but there's slight variations. They're all basically hulking 8-foot tall super soldiers who are not genetically modified quite the same way. They are not like bespoke. These can be mass produced. Every Space Marine actually generates the material to make 2 other Space Marines. See, you make 1 Space Marine, they make 2 Space Marines, they make 2 Space Marines. It's like the best multi-level marketing plan ever. But they also have to, they start getting implanted with new organs, basically, at a relatively young age. So we are talking surgically altered child soldiers. Who
Yay!
Are then
Again, everyone's bad.
Yeah, everyone's bad in the 40k universe. They are
more organs means more human.
Exactly.
Right.
Zim had it right the whole time. And this continues to hold true because in the 41st millennium, when Belisarius Cawl released the Primaris Marines that he'd been working on the whole time, he added 3 new organs. So yes, more organs, more human. Papa John's.
This checks out. Flawless logic.
Yeah. And so along with this, there were also 20 elite, these were kind of bespoke, genetically crafted superhumans that were created to eventually lead these Space Marine legions, 1 for each of those genetic blueprints that we mentioned. And due to various machinations of various forces, Chaos is involved, but there's other beings, because I want to say Erda, who is from one of the novels, is kind of like the kind of mother of the Space Marines. I haven't read that particular book, so this is all like third hand. But these beings, who were called the Primarchs, were scattered throughout the galaxy via the warp in their infancy, and landed on various planets, were raised by the people who found them, sometimes into very loving, healthy households, and sometimes not. And usually the ones that were not turned out real bad, because turns out trauma begets trauma. I'm just gonna say. But as he went forth into the galaxy with these genetically modified super soldiers, the Emperor would find these Primarchs, who at this point had grown to adulthood and in many cases had become like the leaders of their planets.
Mm-hmm.
Not in every case. Again, trauma begets trauma. But in many cases, they had become, because they were demigods, effectively. They grew faster. They were smarter, more physically able than pretty much anyone else on their planet. And so, naturally people flocked to them as leaders, and then they would be placed in charge of the other Space Marines that, held their genetic legacy. And we end up with 18. 18.
18.
It's a nice round number.
There were 20, but we don't talk about 2 of them. And when I say we don't talk about 2 of them, we don't know anything about 2 of them. We know something happened, and that's as far as the lore is ever going to go.
They're redacted.
Going back to Arbiter Ian, he has 2 videos about the 2 missing legions, and one of them is he just starts talking about it, and then like the video cuts out, and there's like commotion behind him, and like the Inquisition's pulling him away. So that was pretty funny. So we end up with 18 legions, and eventually the Emperor decides, okay, I've done my job here. We've pretty much brought most of the galaxy into compliance. I've got some stuff I have to do back home. I'm going to leave one of them, Horus, in charge.
you finish this thing, you finish up this crusade. I'm going to go work on this project at home. I'm not telling any of you about it because I make bad decisions.
And it all worked out, and everyone lived happily ever after.
It did not. It did not. Horus got corrupted by one of the other chapters who had already gone bad because they started worshiping the godlike emperor as a god, despite the fact that he told them he was not a god and was not to be worshipped as god, even though he did very godlike things. And he told them to knock it off and berated them in front of another chapter, in front of another legion, in front of the Ultramarines, in fact. And that was the word bearers. So the word bearers got huffy and said, well, if we can't worship you, we're going to worship somebody else. They worshipped chaos. They made Horus, they basically created the circumstances that caused Horus to fall to chaos, because Horus had also had questions about, well, what happens to us when the war is done? Because, Thunder Warrior thing could happen again. Like, what happens to us when we're done?
Yeah, precedent had been set.
Yeah. And so this, kind of led to the seeds of a schism. And there's the entire thing called the Horus Heresy. I don't want to cover it all here. But in the end, 9 of the legions have gone traitor and basically get forced away into the Eye of Terror. They will be talked about in another episode, possibly our next episode.
Because this is AKA Red Space Marines and Blue Space Marines had to fight each other so they could sell one type of model.
Yep. Basically, we had a product where we had to have we decided to make cheap plastic models of the same thing, just in 2 different colors. Why are they fighting? Aha, excuse has been
Civil
made.
War. Yeah.
The classic story. And so, in the end, the Emperor is all but dead and strapped to the Golden Throne, but the legions are still around, and the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Reboot Gilliman, a.k.a. Bobby G.
Rowboat Girly Man.
Decides that, having legions of tens of thousands of Space Marines is a bad idea because it puts too much power in the hands of one person. So he says, let's split everybody up into chapters of 1,000. Each one will have its own commander, and the original 9 who are still left, they will be chapters. And then they will have child chapters, successor chapters that are related to them, descended from them, but will not fall under their direct control. And thus it has been for 10,000 plus years in the Imperium. And so that is how we get to the Space Marines, who are in these small, relatively elite, because 1,000 on the scale of the galaxy, 1,000 warriors is not a lot in any given chapter. But depending on what fiction you read, those 1,000 can move planets. They are definitely the poster children of 40K. Like, they are the iconic image of 40K. The particular power armor with the Aquila, the double-headed eagle across the chest, the bolter, the bolt gun, the big mass reactive rifle, the chain sword, because regular sword is not good enough. We need chainsaw swords.
Heck yeah.
And in brightly colored armor. And so this is kind of the standard that everyone thinks of, even though, again, there's probably more Space Marine models in production and in collections than there are actual Space Marines in the 40K universe.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But each one of those Space Marines is supposed to be the equivalent of several squads of humans as far as what they can accomplish. They are superhumanly resilient. They can even exist in vacuum for short amounts of time. They can survive radiation that normal humans can't. Their bodies are hyper resistant to disease and toxins. In fact, it's nearly impossible for a Space Marine to get drunk because their I believe it's the eulodic kidney just flushes anything out as a toxin, which means there's one chapter of the Space Wolves that actually does have drinking contests, and a sip of Space Wolf brew would kill 10 normal men.
Also, they can eat the brains of things and consume their memories.
Right, because
that
this is also a horror setting.
And
that one doesn't get talked about as much anymore. Yeah, and spit acid.
Are we the baddies?
We could be. Yeah, because I think that's the thing. you have to
A lot of
remember
skull
Space Marines.
motifs.
Yeah, Space Marines are transhuman. They are not human. They may look human. They may have even some human emotions, but they've also they've been amazingly genetically altered, or surgically altered with new organs and new capabilities that no human being has or probably should have. And they've also had their minds psychologically altered to literally have no sense of fear.
Yeah.
Like there's the statement of, and they shall know no fear. They don't know fear because they physically can't.
Yeah. It's bad. It's bad to do this to children. I'll be the brave one to say this. This is bad.
Yeah.
Child soldiers, not good.
Yeah. And yet these are the heroes of the Imperium. These are the people if you are in trouble and one of the angels of death of the Emperor, like when the Emperor's angels lands on your planet to fight for you, it's like, the Emperor has saved us. Well, maybe, depending on which one landed.
Yeah. Some chapters have better relations with humans than others. Some just literally don't care.
Yeah.
If you are interested in seeing a good representation of the scale of Space Marines, at GW events, they have a statue of a Terminator, and in the past they've had regular Space Marines, and you see we took photos in front of it, and the thing is twice as tall as us. So that's a pretty fair in-universe representation of how gigantic these guys are. They are physically twice the size of a normal human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're and especially when you add in the bulk of the power armor, which, if I remember right, has a tiny little fusion generator on the backpack. These things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Little mini nuke.
Yeah. Now, from a gameplay standpoint, Space Marines are probably the most well-rounded faction because kind of as the poster child of 40K and the faction that a lot of people start with because it's been in every starter product for years. Every starter product, it's Space Marines versus somebody. A lot of games, board games and things, have Space Marine models. When you play video games, it's almost always as the starting faction will be Space Marines. So we're all familiar with Space Marines. And so when somebody gets into the game, it is very likely to be your first experience. And Space Marines are probably the most well-rounded faction. They are generally good at everything. They have the tools to do any particular job and to do it pretty well. There are definitely going to be factions that are better, are more focused at specific things. Mm-hmm. So we mentioned that Space Marines are super resilient. Well, there are factions that are tougher. They have really great firepower. Their line troops have these bolt guns that are really powerful bolt guns, really powerful ranged weapons. Well, there are armies that do bring tougher stronger weapons that their average troops have. There are units there are armies that are better in close-up fighting. There are armies that have better vehicles, but you very rarely will see an army that has all of those things together the way that a Space Marine army does. Everything a Space Marine unit does, it does well. It'll do it, in many cases it is treated as the baseline, which is kind of unfair because there's a lot of armies that their baseline is never going to catch up with that. If you look at their average troops. They do have units for every kind of play style. And they have, and this game is built into, in the current edition, is built into detachments, and every detachment kind of defines the sub style of an army you're going to play. They have detachments that cover pretty much every possible game style.
Well, and Rob, I'll interject this. If you look at the codexes, which is the book of all of your units, the Space Marine Codex is normally twice the size of any other faction because they have so many units because they cover that wide of a range.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's after they've retired a number of units that filled in other smaller niches. They still have the widest range of models to bring, even though many of them will be built off of that same generic power armor body.
And I'll say this because this is something I kind of wanted to drop in. Some point this feels like a good spot. Space Marine models are also tend to be some of the easiest to paint. So if you were just starting out in the hobby, you can buy a paint starter set, which will come with a Marine and it'll come with the paint pots and stuff to do. and you can paint up a Marine to like tabletop quality pretty much out of the gate. There are a lot of people who can go a lot further and make their Space Marines look amazing, but the tools exist now with like contrast paints and stuff like that people can pick up a Space Marine faction and have it painted very quickly. So if you were just getting into the hobby, that's another reason why this is a great starter army. The models are simple enough that like you can paint them up very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, while there are a number of kind of official paint schemes, and when I say that, I mean like we've mentioned that there are all these different legions, and then those were broken into chapters. Well, each of those chapters has their own color scheme and heraldry. So there's tons of options if you just want to go with things that have already been kind of designed by Games Workshop. But this is also the easiest army to make up your own faction.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can basically take your Space Marines, paint them any way you want, and just call it, hey, this is a new chapter. And you can decide, this chapter is derived from this other existing chapter or not. There are chapters in 40K where nobody knows who they're based off. I mean, that is straight from the lore. So it's very easy to come up with your own chapter, your own subfaction. Just pick the appropriate models that fit the play style you want, come up with whatever color scheme you want, and you're good. I will say, though, as far as selecting those models, and we touched on this very briefly a bit ago, oh my god, the squad names that they've been adding since 8th edition are repetitive and thus confusing, because someone at Games Workshop decided that everything that's a Space Marine as far as infantry needs to start with the letters IN.
So is that how it's supposed? INs for infantry?
I don't think that's it.
Okay, because I was going to say, what about the Inceptors that are jump?
Well, they are still jump infantry.
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, but it's there's the base troops, which are intercessors, and then there's infiltrators, not to be confused with incursors, which are built from the same kit but are a different kind of stealth unit. Then there's the Inceptors, which are jump troops, and then there's the Infernus Marines. It gets confusing very quickly. Yeah. That is one downside of this army. In the past, it used to be like, well, there's tactical squads and assault squads and devastator squads, and those units are still generally available, but they are representative of old models. And what I mean by that is pre-8th edition, so we're talking like 6 years ago, Marines had been built from one model kit or one design, and that design had been updated and like models recut and things like that over the years. But basically, there was one scale of Space Marine, and that was the model type that was used for 20 years or more, like from like even before that, like from the mid 90s onward.
Yeah. And there's a really great Snipe and Web video about the history of Space Marine models. That's, if you're a certain type of person, you find it very fascinating. I find it fascinating.
You are that kind of person. It is made for you. But in 8th edition, they decided they did something, first of all, they hadn't done in a long time. They moved the plot forward. We are actually in an era of 40K where the story moves, and that's actually really cool, because for a long time it didn't. And so one of the things they did, and this was and I think is still, there are still people who find this to be a very controversial move, is that they decided to upscale the Space Marines a bit and make them what there is considered true scale, which means like, well, if a normal human is this big, then a Space Marine should be this big. As we mentioned, Space Marines are larger than normal humans.
Yeah, we talk about like 40K is technically like a 28 millimeter scale game, but it's not really. Like, it's 28 millimeter heroic scale, which means they can make things bigger and like more exaggerated as they see fit. So yeah, you had over time, like as newer models came into the game, faces got bigger, like more exaggerated to be able to paint, and like the scale, Space Marines started looking smaller in comparison. So this is kind of a chance to reset and make Space Marines bigger and like distinctive on the tabletop, which I'm all for.
Right. And Ardian also has a video about this whole thing as well, about the shift into Primaris. So basically, in the storyline, they brought Reboot Gilliman back basically from the dead. He had been gravely injured by one of his rogue brothers and had basically been put into stasis at the point of death. And in the big event that launched 8th edition, they brought him back. They, through the use of space elf magic and weird technology, they brought Reboot Gilliman back to life.
And the God of the Dead.
Yes, well, yes. That's one weird space magic, space elf
Okay.
magic. But along with that, the one of the heads of the Mechanicus, Belisarius Call, who had mentioned a bit earlier, revealed that he'd been working on a project that Reboot Gilliman had tasked him with 10,000 years before, after the Horus Heresy, and that was, we need to make better Space Marines. We need new, better Space Marines. We need to improve on the Emperor's design, which was tantamount to heresy. Because you're not supposed to improve on anything the Emperor does. If the Emperor did it, it was the best.
Mars
ever.
doesn't care.
Yeah, Mars worships their own version of the Emperor, but technically, Call was keeping this secret from everybody in Mechanicus too, because he does his own thing and he doesn't care. And so at that point, all these Space Marines that he had developed and improved upon were basically unlocked from stasis and they were distributed to the various chapters that needed them, along with the technology and information on how to continue making more Primaris Marines. And over time, there have been more and more Primaris Marines, and Games Workshop has stopped making for the most part, the smaller Marine. And even older characters that existed before they were Primaris would be gravely injured, and they're like, oh, look, we have surgically altered him to make him cross the Rubicon Primaris, which is what they call the process of making somebody into a Primaris Marine. And now they are back and better than ever. And so we have upscaled versions of existing characters. This was very divisive in the community. Some people got very, very mad and said, I'm just never going to get rid of anything of like my old Marines. And in the storyline, those are like the Firstborn. And then we've got the Primaris Marines. There have been characters who have mentioned, hey, haven't you noticed that all these new Primaris are going to show up and replace us? So even in universe, they're kind of aware that it's going to happen. So old Marines they're not exactly getting Thunder Warriored, but they are kind of being phased out. Yeah, like through attrition. And now at this point, you can build an entire army just entirely with Primaris models, and which does mean there are some classic Games Workshop vehicle designs that are being phased out of the Marine line over time, like the Rhino, which is a transport that can't hold Primaris Marines because of reasons.
I mean, it should be able to. Looks like it could hold like 3 of them.
It should. Well, I mean, it looks like it should be able to hold 3 normal, 3 Firstborn Marines, but over to it's like eventually that will be retired or just left to other factions. But now it's all Primaris all the time, and honestly, that's fine because I think Primaris Marines look better. Controversial opinion here. Hot take: Primaris Marines are better.
They do look better. And that gives them more flexibility to make different design choices going forward.
Right, right. So, how do Space Marines play? I mentioned that they are kind of well-rounded, and their army rule gives them even more consistency. Their army rule is called Oath of Moment, and Oath of Moment is pretty simple. In your command phase, so near the beginning of each turn, or each of your turns, I should say, you pick an enemy unit. That is your Oath of Moment. Your Space Marines have sworn that thing is going to be destroyed. Everyone in your army who is a Space Marine rerolls their hit rolls against it. So if you miss, and Space Marines generally are hitting on 3s or better, and that's your Oath target, you can re-roll it. So you're very likely to get in as many hits as you can. In addition, if you are what I'm going to refer to as a non-supplement Marine, and we'll get to that in a bit, but if you are not one of the Marine factions that is represented in the base Space Marine Codex, you also get +1 to wound on your wound rolls. So you are very likely to hit with as many hits as possible, and those hits are more likely to wound. So it makes your army very consistent. The only downside is this is 1 unit a turn, and your opponent may have many units. But if you have something that absolutely positively needs to die, that's the way that you can try to ensure that thing dies.
And it's a great way of teaching people focus fire to finish things off so they don't bother you later.
Right. It's a very easy rule to wrap your head around. Pick a thing, everybody's better at killing that thing for a turn. So super easy, gives you a very consistent feel to the army. Now, I also mentioned detachments earlier, and again, these are basically when you build an army, you choose a detachment, and that detachment will give buffs to certain types of units, or will give your army an extra rule that kind of dictates how it plays. It gives you access to special upgrades and a set of 6 stratagems. In Space Marine armies, 5 of those stratagems will differ from detachment to detachment. One of them will always be Armor of Contempt. And Armor of Contempt is basically an ability that says when someone targets you for an attack, you spend a command point, and for that block of attacks, it used to be for the rest of the phase, but it has been eroded to, or balance state is slated to be for that round of attacks, your opponent's armor penetration gets worse by 1. So they are less likely to pierce your armor, which, again, Space Marines, being the well-rounded faction they are, have generally pretty good armor. They don't have the best armor, but they have pretty solid armor. So you have access to something that will give one unit more survivability for one set of attacks. Again, this is not going to be a full breakdown like a codex breakdown. I'm just going to hit real quickly what all these detachments in the generic Space Marine Codex do. So you've got the Gladius Strike Force, which is kind of seen as the generic version. Like, this is what you take if you can't think of anything else. This is the take all comers kind of detachment. And basically, it gives you access to 3 doctrines: Tactical, Assault, and Devastator, which will give your units a special ability for a turn. You can use each one once, and then after that, you can't use them again, barring like some use of like stratagems in the detachment. But like, it could give you like able to advance and charge, or like all your weapons get assault. You can advance and shoot, things like that. Again, it is kind of the fallback. If I can't think of anything else, this will make anything I take better. And it's available to pretty much every Space Marine army. All of these are available. All the ones I'm about to talk about are available to everyone, but that is the one that everybody kind of falls back on if they can't think of anything else. Moving on, you have the Anvil Siege Force. This one is dedicated more towards being better with your bolt guns. So it is focusing on you shoot better when you stand still. Like, all your weapons get heavy, which means if you don't move, they're +1 to hit. And if you did remain stationary, I believe they get better to wound as well. There's the Ironstorm Spearhead, which, when you look at its rules, seems like it's just kind of focusing on being consistent, because the detachment rule is every unit can reroll 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll, or 1 roll to determine how much damage was done every phase. But all of their upgrades and stratagems are built around vehicles. So it's about making your vehicles more consistent. You've got the Firestorm Assault Force, which is about close-up shooting with like flamethrowers and melta-guns, which are like short-range anti-armor guns, and also for jumping out of transports and fighting, or jumping back into transports after you fight. There's the Stormlance Task Force, which is focuses on bikes and allowing you to advance, which means, roll to get extra movement when you move and still be able to charge your opponent. So it's about getting up in your opponent's face very quickly with bikes and transports. There's the Vanguard Spearhead, which is your stealth detachment. This one gives you the ability to be harder to hit and to always have cover if someone shoots you from more than 12 inches away. There's the First Company Task Force, which is the first company in Space Marines is the Veteran Company. The company, like, once you have served in the Space Marines for so long, you will eventually get moved up to the First Company, and that is when you get access to Tactical Dreadnought, or also known as Terminator armor, which is big, chunky armor that makes you basically a small walking tank. And the First Company Task Force is focused on Terminators and veterans. And once per game, you can choose to have full rerolls to wound against your Oath of Moment target, which makes them even more consistent. And then finally, a detachment that they released last year during what we called Grotmas, which was Advent, basically. For Games Workshop did an Advent calendar and released a whole bunch of detachments for every faction, and the one that Space Marines got was called the Librarius Conclave, which focused on their librarians, which are basically their psychers, their wizards, and gave them access to special powers that they could pick for their different psychers. So, do you like magic users? You can play the Librarius Conclave. Do you like tanks and vehicles? The Ironstorm Spearhead might be your thing. Do you want to be like a sneaky infiltrating force? The Vanguard Spearhead is your thing. It's like there's a detachment for every kind of style of gameplay. other than maybe just pure on I run up and punch you in the face, because Space Marines are a slightly a little bit more nuanced than that, although we will get into some Space Marine forces that are not. I hear you, Kevin. I hear your spite from the World Eaters player over there.
Did Kevin say something I couldn't hear?
How dare you call somebody who likes melee simple? I mean, you're correct, but how dare you?
There is a nuance to melee. One day when we find it, we'll talk about it. But until then,
chain axe go burr.
Yeah, exactly. So I've talked about detachment style, and we've mentioned some chapters, but let's talk about the sub-factions of the Space Marine and what detachments kind of represent their fighting style. And also, on top of this, over the last few months, Games Workshop has released a number of combat patrols for each Space Marine, like what they call the founding chapters. From the original 9 legions, 6 of them are represented in the base Space Marine codex. And so they released combat patrols for all of those, along with named characters, so that everybody could have characters, as opposed to really only being the Ultramarines having much in the way of characters, because the Ultramarines have more named characters than any other Space Marine faction.
Poor Ultramarines.
Yeah, I know. See, they get so ignored. And so they're about to get several new ones. In fact, they just got like a brand new version of their chapter master like 2 months ago, who also had been updated a year or two before that. So yeah, Ultramarines, they get a lot of attention. They're the ones with the blue with like the upside down Omega symbol. So they are the ones that you are most likely to see. The Space Marines you're playing as in Space Marine 2 are, well, except for the very beginning. At the very beginning of Space Marine 2, you're playing with the faction we're going to talk about last. But after that, you're back to playing Ultramarines. And although in that game, you can eventually in multiplayer style your Space Marines to be many of the other chapters that we're going to talk about, or even again, roll your own. But Ultramarines are the generic Space Marine. Like if Space Marine is nothing else, Ultramarine fits in nicely. They are the most well-rounded. They have access to the most characters. They have just all the toys. And they are most represented by the Gladius Strike Force, which is the focusing on those particular doctrines of fighting. How is a stereotypical Space Marine fight? Also, the Ultramarines are one of 2 chapters who have their Primarch back. Rabude Gilliman is the Primarch of the Ultramarines, and he is also very representative of what makes an Ultramarine an Ultramarine. But besides the Gladius Strike Force, they also have access to a detachment called the Blade of Ultramar, which is the Gladius Strike Force, but it's better if you have Marneus Calgar attached, because he lets you keep using the same doctrines over and over again, as long as he's on the table. But otherwise, I mean, it has slightly different stratagems and different upgrades, but the detachment rule is the same as the Gladius Strike Force. So it's generic, but better if you have the right guy attached. And yeah, that pretty much, I mean, the Ultramarines, they are, again, generally good at everything, not really focused on anything, but they can do everything kind of well, which is like, that is the most stereotypical Space Marine you can have.
Ultramarines also were the ones who wrote the Codex Astartes, so they're the poster child for the doctrine that all Space Marines are supposed to follow anyway.
Right.
So that's why they're really, really the generic and baseline for all Space Marines.
Right. And they also, I believe, have the most successor chapters. So chapters who have been spun off of their base chapter than anyone else. So it's like their fighting style has propagated throughout the Imperium as like, this is how Space Marines fight. This is what they do. This is what they are. Moving on, you have the Imperial Fists, whose their Primarch was Rogel Dorn. They are primarily seen in yellow power armor with a black and white fist logo. Rogel Dorn no longer with us, we think.
They found part of him.
Theoretically, yeah, they found like his hands, right?
His hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
His Imperial Fist, you might say.
Yes, one might say. And their thing was they were siege experts. They were experts at defenses and both defense and breaking sieges, and also they are possibly the most trained with their bolters. They are the ones that the Anvil siege forces base off of, which again gives you better shooting when you're standing still. So the idea is kind of take positions, lay down bolter fire. Their other detachment they got was called the Emperor's Shield. And that one, the army rule is focused on Oath of Moment. It lets you reroll ones to wound. And that's in addition to the +1 to wound that you would get for being a non-supplemental Marine. It also, if you have Lysander, who's in Terminator armor, he allows them to, I think, reroll all wounds, or at least his unit. And all the stratagems and upgrades are focused on Terminator armor. So in this case, like, and he is wearing Terminator armor as well. So it's like it wants you to basically, this is the defensive detachment. You load up your Terminators. You're better at wounding, but you're also going to have fewer models because you are using Terminators, which are more expensive point wise. So you can either play that like we are the defense of the Empire. In fact, the Imperial Fists have a Rogel Dorn came from the landed on the planet of Inuit, and that's where he came up and grew up. But they also have been in charge of the defense of Earth for 10,000 years. In fact, during the Horus Heresy, Rogel Dorn was put in charge of the defense of the Imperial Fortress, and they have a space station called the Phalanx, which sits above or orbits Earth, and that is one of the places where they are based out of. So they are very much like the defensive Space Marine force, and so that is reflected both by their the Anvil Siege Force and the Emperor's Shield, being more like stand still, put out firepower, hold the line type force. Then you've got the Iron Hands. Their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, was the first to die in the Horus Heresy, beheaded by his brother Fulgrim. Sad to say, that did not have a good effect psychologically on the rest of his legion. They came to basically view... They'd always been good at working with machinery and vehicles. Ferrus Manus was a master of the forge himself. And they decided, well, the problem with Ferrus Manus was that he was made of flesh, and flesh is weak, and metal is strong. And so therefore, if we made ourselves more out of metal, we would be stronger, and he wouldn't have died, and we wouldn't have failed to protect him. Again, trauma begets trauma. That's just going to be the running theme of Space Marines, I think, and actually of most of the 40K universe. But they have more tech Marines. They are closer aligned with the Mechanicus than possibly any other Space Marine chapter. And they are focused on like vehicles, machinery. Their attachment that is most identified with them is the Ironstorm Spearhead, which is that vehicle-focused detachment that focuses on consistency. That you're re-rolling to hit, or you're better to hit, or re-rolling wounds. So you're just everybody's a little bit better at things. They also have a detachment called the Hammer of Averni, which has different upgrades and stratagems than the Emperor's Shield for the Imperial Fist, but its army rule is the same. And it is also Terminator focused, so they're not really that different. The stratagems are a little bit different. And again, it's one better if you have their new named character included. But generally, if people are playing Iron Hands, they're going to be playing with a lot of tanks, a lot of dreadnoughts, which are basically big walkers that you put a nearly dead Space Marine into when he's too injured to fight, but not so injured that he's dead. So they'll strap him into a big walking coffin with guns. And the Iron Hands actually are big fans of that because, hey, now most of my fleshy body is gone, and I now have a big, cool iron body, and I'm awesome.
Hard to argue, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Say their color scheme, the Iron Hands color scheme is black, just black, with metal, metal trim, but black. The Raven Guard, also black. These are very easy armies to paint.
Mm-hmm.
They are focused more on stealth, infiltration, and occasionally also dropping in jump troops to do surgical strikes after locations have been scouted out. Their Primarch was Corvus Corax, which means crow, so hence the name. I don't think we know exactly what happened to Corax. He's just kind of gone.
Disappeared into the webway, I think.
Yeah. I think he's one of the ones that disappeared into the webway, which is an alternate universe. Yeah. But
he just got really, really good at stealth.
Apparently,
he's so good at stealth.
John Cena.
He is standing perfectly still. No one can see him. But his army, like the Raven Guard, are experts in scout movements, infiltration, sniping, things like that. The detachment based off of them is that Vanguard Spearhead, which makes you harder to shoot and have better defense when someone is more than 12 inches away from you. And they also have the Shadowmark Talon, which is the same thing, but better if their new chapter master is attached. So it's Vanguard Spearhead or Vanguard Spearhead with extra sauce, basically. They are kind of a one note. Like Raven Guard don't do big frontal assaults generally. It's not their style. We're moving on. We've got 2 more to go. We've got the Salamanders, who are in green with a flame and dragon motif. Their Primarch was Vulcan, just Vulcan, no last name. And he is kind of special in that he is also what they call a perpetual. In the 40k universe, there are certain members of humanity who, I don't want to say they can't die, just they don't stay dead. They can be blasted into ash and still regenerate. Vulcan has died and come back several times, and he is currently MIA, but he has promised to return. In fact, there is a legend that I think there's a dozen relics that he helped craft that have been scattered throughout the galaxy, and once all of those have been recollected by the Salamanders, that he will return, which puts him very high on the probability chart of Primarchs that could come back next. But the Salamanders are masters of flame and melta weapons. They basically, anything that involves a lot of heat, they are very good at. And their detachment is also the Firestorm Assault Force, the one that is better with short range shooting, which all the, like, flamer and melta weapons are all generally 12-inch range, so this makes them better and good at getting out of transports. Basically, like, right up, pop out of transport, set someone on fire, get back in the tank. They also have the Forge Father Seekers detachment, which is the Firestorm detachment, but better if their named character, Vulcan Heston, who, not Vulcan, just named after Vulcan, don't get confused, is in the detachment. They're better, but it's the same thing. Salamanders also have a couple of other measures of distinctive. They are possibly the closest thing we have to heroic Space Marines. Now, Space Marines are generally portrayed as heroes in their own stories, but the Salamanders are one of the few chapters that actually focus on protecting humans, like protecting civilians. That's kind of something, it's bad when they have to, when just doing the basic good guy thing, it stands out.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the other chapters don't try to kill civilians. They'll try to get civilians out of there, but it's not really a priority.
Yeah, they definitely don't lose sleep over it.
Yeah. The Salamanders actually actively try to protect civilians, which makes them stand out. Also, Salamanders are black, and I don't mean they're dark-skinned. I don't mean they're brown. I mean they're black. Their skin, because of an oddity in their genetics, and every one of these chapters has some slight tweak or mutation in their genetics that makes them a little bit off. The Salamanders have one that apparently any exposure to radiation causes their skin to just go coal black and have red eyes. And so the storyline kind of is, they look like monsters, they look like terrible things, but they're actually like the most heroic Space Marines. Also, we're going to keep bringing him up. Arbiter Ian recently did a video about why the Salamander, like, are the Salamanders black, as in like African American black? And the history of that is fascinating.
Right.
And I recommend watching it because it talks about how characters of non-white skin tone have been portrayed in 40K over the last 30 years. And it's a fascinating watch, and kind of like how they landed on making the Salamanders coal black.
The long and short answer of it, like summary of it, is it's getting better. They're getting better.
They are getting better. They are getting better. But it's interesting to see how they got there. But yeah. Currently in the storyline, in the fluff of the 40K universe, Salamanders look black as night with glowing red eyes.
Yeah.
But they're also good guys. They are like the most good guy space. And then finally, from the chapters reflected in the Space Marine Codex, they're the White Scars. Their Primarch was Jagatai Khan, who may also be gone in the Webway, although not with Corvus Corax. Again, it's one of those things like, it's a mystery. He didn't die during the Horus Heresy. He's not around anymore. We don't think there's no record of his death, so we're pretty sure he rode off into the Webway to fight something or other. And when I say rode off, I mean that literally the White Scars are the bike detachment because they decided to make them the Mongol horseman detachment, but with motorcycles instead. I mean, if the name Jagatai Khan for their Primarch didn't give that away, that they're definitely like they're Mongol themed. In fact, their new character that they released for them, who now has a standalone model, he was only available in a combat patrol for a little while. Subeden Khan.
Yes, because Khan is a name, like the chapter specific name for like their leaders.
Subeden Khan, who has a big chunky jet bike, and he keeps trophy heads on the side, and he fights with basically a big like Naginata style spear because we're going to mix all our Asian themes together. And
totally not chaos too, by the way.
Yeah, totally.
Totally not a chaos thing to do.
Right. But yeah, so they are primarily known as a bike faction. And so their detachment they're based on is that Stormlance Task Force. They also have the Spear Point Task Force, which is their new one, which is just the Stormlance, but better if you have Subeden Khan. There's a theme here with a lot of these detachments. So it's like, we don't want to make it too different. We don't want to make it too wild here and give you... Like, the Imperial Fists are the only ones that really got a different way to play. Everybody else is just like, what if we do the same thing, but it's better if you got the special dude? And all those detachments are available, like those extra detachments are not in the codex. Those are available as a free download if you go to the Warhammer community website and download the Faction Pack Space Marines. All of these extra detachments are available in there. So theoretically, you could just play those like the version that just doesn't have the extra character in it. Because like, for example, the like Hammer of Averni, the Iron Hands one, it lets you reroll wound rolls of 1 against your Oath of Moment target. And if you have Kanik Var on the battlefield, whenever you kill your Oath of Moment target, you get to immediately pick a new one, which is really handy. Spear Point Task Force lets you charge after advancing or falling back, which is what the Stormlance does. But if Subeden Khan destroys an enemy unit, that unit gets a free movement. Forgefather Seekers, which is Vulcan Heston's, it is the same as the Firestorm detachment, but if you have Vulcan Heston, then Infernus squads, which are armed with flamers, can do actions, which is a thing that matters in some missions. They can like shoot or advance and do actions. The Emperor's Shield, it's the same as the Hammers of Inverni, where you get to reroll wound rolls of 1 against your Oath of Moment target. And if you have a unit with Darneth Lysander in it, that unit gets to reroll their wound rolls, not just reroll wound rolls of 1. So it's like all of these get a better version of their rules in some cases if they have the right character. But you could play them without having the character, and it's totally fine. But that is basically everything from the Space Marine Codex. But, as I've mentioned, there are supplemental codexes, and we're going to talk about those. But first, we're going to go ahead and take an ad break. And also, a couple of things, if you want to help support the show, there's 3 good ways to do that. Obviously, listening to the show and listening to the ads and everything, that's great. But if you want to really support us directly, there are 3 great ways. First off is our Patreon, patreon.com/preferred enemies. This gets you access to 2 really special things. First off, an ad-free version of the show. If you like the show, but you don't like the ads and you want to help support us directly, you can join our Patreon. It is $1 a month. It's basically an online tip jar. As of present, we have no episodes locked behind the paywall. You get access to the entire feed on our Patreon ad-free. Also, that gets you access to our Discord, which gets you access to the community of the preferred frenemies, and we would love to have you there. We have a great time hanging out with everybody, and we would love to have you as part of the group as well. So again, that's patreon.com/preferred enemies. It's $1 a month. That adds up. If enough people put in $1, it adds up and helps cover our recording costs and replace microphones, things like that. So we really do appreciate the support there. Second is our YouTube, which is youtube.com/@preferred enemies. We do video versions of every episode, usually released about a week or so after the audio version. And just like and subscribe there, comment, share. We are getting close to, it sounds tiny, but we're getting close to 200 subscribers last time I checked, which, considering a year ago, we weren't even at 100. To quote Disco Stew, if trends like this continue, hey. So, but yeah, do all the things that help us get, fight the algorithm and get in front of more people. And third, we have a merch store, which is at preferredenemies.com/merch. and we sell hats, shirts, stickers, mugs, all kinds of things so you can show some support for the show. We are working on shirt designs. I think, Kevin, you suggested one. I went to Fenris and all I got was my ass kicked.
Yeah.
So that may be coming soon. But check out. We will be rolling out new merch. And one of the things we hope to do with some of the revenue we're going to bring in from both the Patreon and from ads and things is to be able to hire more artists to create more merch, like help us come up with merch designs and things that would be cool for everybody to have access to. So, and again, showing support, helping us out those three ways, it really does help the show. We really do appreciate it. But anyway, we're going to take a break for our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to talk about all the other Space Marine armies you can build with the Space Marine Codex and a little bit extra. See you in a bit. And we're back. It's time to continue our faction focus on Space Marines by talking about the supplemental codexes. So I mentioned there were 6 founding chapters that were represented in the Space Marine Codex. Well, there are 3 that were not, because remember, there were 9 loyal legions at the end of the Horus Heresy. So 3 of those are considered different enough that they warrant their own supplements. Now, these are not standalone books. These books do not contain the rules to make a full Space Marine army. You have to have the Space Marine Codex in addition. Also, all of these factions have access to all of the detachments that are in the Space Marine Codex. Now, not the ones where you have to have like a particular character attached. So like Blade of Ultramar, Hammer of Averni, etc. Those you do not have access to. But all the generics, the Gladius, the Anvil Siege Force, the Iron Storm, Firestorm, Stormlance, all those are available to these armies. They also all bring their own detachments on top of that. But one thing they do lose is they lose that extra +1 to wound against Oath of Moment targets. That's the trade-off for having different rules. But most of them, the rules are just kind of like anything they have is bolted on to Codex Space Marines. They still have access to Oath of Moment. They still have access to all the non-named characters from the Space Marine Codex. They're built out of the same building blocks, but they also do bring a few of their own special units and their own ways to play. We'll start off, we're just going to go alphabetical on these 3 with the Blood Angels, who are primarily seen in red armor. And the Blood Angels Primarch was Sanguinius, who also did not survive the Horus Heresy, whereas Ferrus Manus was the first Primarch to die in the Horus Heresy. Sanguinius was the last Loyalist Primarch to die in the Horus Heresy, killed by Horus himself right before the Emperor and Horus fought. And I've read the chapters where Horus fights Sanguinius, and it's horrifying what Horus does to Sanguinius. It real bad. It is really, really just horror show kind of thing. And this has haunted the Blood Angels ever since. The Blood Angels always had a little bit of what we would call a rage problem, a little bit of anger management issue. They were just kind of inherently drawn to bloody combat. But when their Primarch was found, Sanguinius, who was also a foul mutant in the fact that he had these beautiful feathered angel wings, but technically is a mutant, he kind of helped the Legion temper itself and temper that rage, especially through the study of like arts and fine crafting. And they're also all very beautiful. They took after their gene father. And also, Sanguinius was slightly psychic and had visions of what was going to happen to him. So he kind of knew he was going to die. But this had another side effect because when he died, there was basically a psychic shockwave through his entire bloodline. And ever since, over time, members of the Blood Angels or any chapters descended from the Blood Angels will occasionally go mad. They will occasionally have visions of Sanguinius fighting against Horus or visions of fighting against the sons of Horus in the final days of the Horus heresy, to the point where that's all they see. That's everything they see is an enemy to be killed, and doesn't matter what you send them up against, they are just seeing Horus and the traitor Marines in their minds. And the only ones that can kind of keep them vaguely under control are the chapter's chaplains, who can at least get them under control enough to point them roughly in the direction of the enemy and say, go fight. And they'll run off in a mad frenzy and go kill the enemy, and then it hopefully die in the process. And if they don't die in the process, then generally they will be culled at the end of the battle, because they're too dangerous to keep around. Only one Blood Angel has ever beaten the Black Rage, which is what it's referred to. And that is their chief librarian, Mephiston, who had a building fall on him, and he was trapped under the rubble for 7 days. And when he came out the other end, he had been a librarian named Calistarius. And when he came out the other side, he was Mephiston, and he was better in every way, sort of. But yeah, the Blood Angels also have another strange genetic mutation. They're vampires. They're vampires. They drink blood. They have a thing called the Red Thirst, which maybe they drink blood. They tend to keep little vials of blood on them. All their special character models are modeled with little vials of blood that they keep with them. And so yeah, they drink blood. Some of their successor chapters drink more blood than others. Some of them have gone straight to just eating flesh. It's not good.
Yeah, but on the grand scale of things, it's not bad.
Yeah.
And their jump infantry are gold, so they do sparkle like vampires.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. They do like nipples now, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they used to have nipples. Now they don't. They are nippleless, Marie. Yeah, they always kind of had like that the molded like Greek breastplate style armor, where like the abs and pectorals would be like sculpted into the power armor. And because again, that was that whole like the classical design and things like that. Yeah, like the artistry that Sanguinius taught them to kind of help make them better. And it's what kind of kept them from falling to, the blood god Khorne, which Khorne has never been happy about that, because he feels like the Blood Angels are rightfully his. And so far they have eluded him.
Legit.
But the Blood Angels, they are definitely a chapter that is focused on close quarters fighting. Their detachments tend to make them better when they are in close combat. They're also known for using a lot of jump troops, because they are descending angels. So in fact, their chapter master Dante, their special veterans, the Sanguinary Guard, are all jump troops. And so they are move quickly, surgical strike when needed, and also just fight viciously in hand-to-hand combat. But they can also do other things. They're just as good at shooting as other Marines. They just are better at fighting close up. Also, I mentioned the Black Rage and the ones that go mad. Those get put into groups called the Death Company. And the Death Company, their things are, they are better at fighting. They can shrug off pain, but also they cannot hold objectives unless somebody's with them. They need an adult, basically. You can run an army with just Death Company, and they do have a detachment that focuses on that, but that's when you're playing a killing game rather than a holding objective game at that point. Death Company are just the Blood Angels that have gone so mad that they are only used basically as human missiles.
Yeah. Again, these are the good guys.
Yeah, these are...
Let me reiterate that.
Giving them a chance to die in combat is seen as a mercy. And it's also, when you only have 1,000 members of your chapter, everyone that goes mad is when you have to replace, but you still want to at least let them go out fighting. So it's like, I get it. But yeah, again, these randomly psychotic blood drinking vampires are our heroes. So just keep that in mind. They have 4 detachments. There's the Liberator Assault Force, which is their their generic one, and it is focused on assault. You have more attacks and you are stronger when you are charging. So you want to always be rushing up in people's faces with the Liberator Assault Force. And in fact, that detachment has rules. It's like a lot of their stratagems are, you can have this, like if you use the stratagem, you can do this or that, or you can give into the red thirst and do both, but then you are battle shocked for the rest of the turn and you can't hold objectives. So it's like you're almost Death Company. You're getting there, getting real close. Then they have the Lost Brethren, which is their Death Company detachment, and their big thing is they, as their units take losses, they get better. So they get better at hitting, and then when they're below, like when the minute they lose somebody, that unit gets better at hitting, and the minute they get below half of their starting strength, they're better at wounding as well. We'll see this with other factions later on in other episodes, but this is kind of how they represent the Death Company. Like the more of them that die, the more vicious the last few standing are to try to get the job done, which in their brain is kill Horus, even though Horus has been dead for 10,000 years. It's not going to stop them from trying. Then there's the Angelic Host, which focuses on jump troops. And this detachment has an ability that has become known in 40K as Uppy Downy, in that they have jump troops who can basically, if they are not currently tied up in combat, they can leave the board. And how many is based on the game size, but you can have units leave the board and then deep strike back onto the board in the next turn. And then finally, their Grotmus detachment was the Angelic Inheritors, which is their character detachment. And this one's kind of a unique among Space Marine chapters and detachments in that basically, because the spirit of Sanguinius, he was psychically enabled, and because it kind of permeated throughout the rest of the chapter and his bloodline going on 10,000 plus years, every Blood Angel hero, every Blood Angel's captain, lieutenant, what have you, basically carries a little bit of that soul of Sanguinius. And the idea is that you basically at the beginning of the game, you pick a couple of buffs that all your characters get, because they're all carrying on that mantle of the angel Sanguinius himself. And so it's kind of a neat way to have like characters who are joining to units and are buffing the units, and you can kind of tailor it to what you're fighting against. But it's kind of like Doctrines, but not exactly. But it's tied specifically to characters. It's a different way to play that nobody else really does. And so again, it represents that inheritance from their Primarch, even though their Primarch is long dead. And so they basically get the inheritance, both good and bad, from being related to Sanguinius and having him die in such a horribly tragic way. But at least they didn't go as insane as the Iron Hands did and decided to start cutting off parts of their body and replacing them with robot bits.
Again, everyone handles trauma in their own way.
Yes. Moving on, we have the other angels, the Dark Angels, who were the first Legion, and their Primarch was and is, ding, 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 we have our second recurring Primarch, Lionel Johnson. And much like the other returned Primarch, everyone thought he was dead for a long time.
He was just out taking a walk.
He was napping for a bit first. He had to sleep first. He had to kind of sleep it off. So the Dark Angels, they were one of the loyalist legions during the Horus Heresy, for the most part. They did eventually find out what was going on. They declared their loyalty for the Emperor, and Lionel Johnson took most of the Dark Angels and left to go fight in the Heresy. But they left a good number of them on their home planet of Caliban, which is where Lionel Johnson had landed as an infant and had been raised, and left a garrison detachment there, led by basically his closest friend Luther, and said, okay, you guys guard the home front, we're going to go fight. And while they were gone, the voices of chaos started prodding and poking Luther and said, oh, they left you behind because they don't think you're good enough. And obviously, they're backing the wrong horse. You should totally join chaos. And so Luther and the rest of the garrison went traitor. When the Dark Angels got back home, they realized, for one thing, they got fired on when they started coming back. And so they landed on Caliban and they started fighting. And eventually Luther and Lionel Johnson were in combat. And Luther should not have been able to hold off against a Primarch single-handedly, but he was infused with the power of chaos, much like Horus was against the Emperor. And a warp storm hit. Caliban blew up while people were still on it. A large fragment of it still remains, and that is the rock, which is the Dark Angel's home to this day. But at the end, only Luther was seen standing. And Lionel Johnson's body was gone. Luther had also gone mad because then he had, in a moment of lucidity, had realized what he had done, and he allowed himself to be captured because he had gone entirely mad. But a lot of the other Dark Angels who had gone traitor had split using the warp storm to escape. The Dark Angels knew this was a problem because suddenly there were a bunch of traitor Dark Angels running around throughout the galaxy. Didn't want anyone to know, because they knew that if they told everyone that a third or however much of their chapter had gone traitor, that they might be seen as traitors too, and they didn't want that to happen. So they decided to keep it a secret. And they've been chasing what they call the Fallen, as in fallen angels, for 10,000 years. But they decided not to just tell anyone in the chapter after the chapters were split up. They're like, no, only the very most top level people need to know. If you just become if you start off as an initiate and become a Dark Angel, you don't get to know the secret until you've proven yourself. And then we can tell you what the real deal is. And that is referred to as the Inner Circle. Those Dark Angels veterans, which includes all their captains, all their chaplains, their librarians, and all their veterans, know the secret that there are fallen Dark Angels out there that we need to find. Meanwhile, nobody knew what had happened to Lionel Johnson except for the fans, because in recent codexes leading up to the last couple of years, that basically there's a whole thing of, and secretly Lionel Johnson is in a cavern deep buried in the rock that nobody knows about except for the Watchers in the Dark, which is these little Jawa things that are on the rock for reasons. We don't exactly know what they are, but they just kind of wander around. They're these little robed guys, and they knew how to get to where Lionel Johnson was. And then eventually a codex came out and said, and they don't know that there was a cavern inside the rock where Lionel Johnson was resting, but it's empty now. Ooh. And then during the Arcs of Omen storyline that led from 9th to 10th edition, Lionel Johnson showed up. He had aged a bit. He looks older than Rabute Gilliman. And he can apparently wander. It's not the webway and it's not the warp, but it's like the misty forest of Caliban as it once was. So he can just kind of step out of this mystic forest and appear and fight things and then disappear back in the mystic forest if he wants. It's weird. But yes, the Dark Angels are really kind of modeled off of like Arthurian knights with Lionel Johnson doing the whole King Arthur. He is, near death and sleeping, but one day he will awaken and save us all. And so he is back. He carries the Emperor's shield with him, much like Rabute Gilliman has the Emperor's flaming sword. And together they fight crime. No, actually, as far as we know, they haven't met yet. I don't know. Have they?
I don't think they've met yet in canon, but I was going to say the other Primarchs have to start coming back pretty soon. Otherwise, they're going to be left with like the Emperor's scraps. Like right. It's going to get real grim for a while.
I've told you my thoughts about Lehman Rust. He just needs to come back and strap a Lehman Rust tank on each one of his feet saying, hey, these are mine.
The Emperor's skates.
Yeah.
But the Dark Angels, they are kind of split. The way their chapters are broken out, they kind of form a set of sub-factions. So you have, I mentioned earlier that the first company of a chapter tends to be the veteran company. And in this case, the Dark Angels' first company is the Deathwing. The Deathwing are their veterans. They are primarily in Terminator armor, although not all of them. Blade Guard veterans, Vanguard veterans are considered Inner Circle members as well. A lot of their Dreadnoughts, although not all, may be considered members of the Inner Circle. And obviously their leadership is in the Inner Circle. And the Deathwings are the ones who are tasked with actually capturing the Fallen. If the Dark Angels find out that there are Fallen in the area, it is the Deathwing who will be sent directly to deal with them. But first you have to find out where the Fallen are and catch up with them and set a trap. And that falls to the second company, which is the Raven Wing. The Raven Wing are all bike-based, bike and land speeder based. They are a fast attack force who are basically tasked to harry down the Fallen and then leave teleport homers so that the Deathwing can teleport in and capture them so that they can be interrogated later and find out where the other Fallen are. The Deathwing are primarily painted in bone armor, and the Ravenwing are all in black. And then there's everyone else, which is informally known as Greenwing. That is just the rest of the Dark Angels who wear green armor. They are the second chapter to have a returned Primarch, and that Primarch is a beater in close combat. They keep having to like tune him and retune him and fix his points because he either goes from like not being good enough to being, oh my god, way too good. Because he's a bit of he's a combat beast, and he now can just like uppy downy on the board every turn if you want. They have 5 detachments available. So their generic one is the Unforgiven Task Force, and this one is kind of focused on having a grim resolve to finish their job. Basically, whenever they are battle shocked, they are normally when you are battle shocked, you lose all your objective control. You cannot hold an objective while you are battle shocked. If you're playing Unforgiven Task Force, you are still OC1 when battle shocked. So you can still hold objectives even if you have failed morale. You still can't use stratagems, but you can at least hold objectives.
I mean, that's something, and it does come into play. I do wish I could use stratagems because I get battle shocked a lot.
Now, on the other hand, there's the Inner Circle, which is a detachment that is focused on the Deathwing and specifically focused on the Deathwing hunting down, deciding particular objectives are important. So like every turn you pick objectives and then they get bonuses while they are either trying to take that objective or while they are holding that objective. And so it's basically the Deathwing have decided this target needs to be taken. They will take it. Then on the other hand, you have the Company of Hunters, which is the Ravenwing detachment, and which is focused on moving quickly, very similar to the Stormlance detachment, which for a while people were just running the Stormlance task force rather than the Company of Hunters.
Because it was better.
Yeah, it was better. And that's some of these, like when you have the issues of, well, you have 2 detachments that are kind of doing the same thing. This is one of the reasons why they had to take away, they gave a bonus to Oath of Moment that non-supplemental chapters get, that supplemental chapters don't get, because it was like, well, you should be playing your detachment rather than these over here, rather than the generic ones.
Well, then why don't we just get all the stuff in one book rather than being a supplement?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yes.
It would also make the book like twice as big, but I think that would be worth it. Then there's the Wrath of the Rock, which I believe is the most recent detachment. And that one is focused on survivability. Your units have transhuman, which is a shorthand for an ability where if an attack comes in and the strength of the attack is higher than your unit's toughness, then the attacker is -1 on wound rolls against that target. We will see this ability show up more in other factions, but transhuman physiology was a thing that the Dark Angels had back in the day, and the Wrath of the Rock brings that back. And then finally, there's the Lion's Blade Task Force, which was their Grotmus detachment, which is focused on the combination of Ravenwing and Deathwing working together to try to hunt down and capture the Fallen. And so the units give buffs and ability bonuses to each other. So if you want to do that kind of hybrid where you're doing a little bit of both of those, Lion's Blade would be the way to go. I think Wrath of the Rock is the one that's actually used more now. Most of the others are kind of seen it like the Dark Angels detachments were not seen as terribly good when the book dropped.
No, even when I was running them in our little Crusade League I was running the vehicle detachment from the Space Marine Codex. But yeah, after Wrath of the Rock landed, that is like the definitive Dark Angels detachment now.
Right, yeah. And then the last of our founding chapters, the Space Wolves, with their Primarch Leman Russ. Leman Russ was the Primarch of the Space Wolves. He landed on the planet of Fenris, which is known in the parlance of the Imperium as a death world. A death world is a world which is basically not friendly to human life. So in some cases, it's because there are horrible predators and like flora and fauna that will try to kill you. Or sometimes maybe the planet is just very inhospitable. With Fenris, it's a little bit of both. There are giant beasts that will try to kill you. Also, the planet is a frozen hellscape most of the time, but due to a highly elliptical orbit, once in a while it becomes a volcanic hellscape and then refreezes once it gets far enough from its sun. It is not a pleasant place to be. Also, there are no wolves on Fenris, as any Space Wolf fan will tell you, except there seem to be a lot of wolves on Fenris because they tend to ride them and have giant packs of them that they bring with them. Fluff-wise, these are Viking-themed Marines. There's no other way to put it. These are space Vikings.
Who are kind of like werewolves.
Well, yeah,
they're werewolf theme too.
Yeah. Whereas Blood Angels are, they're vampires. Space Wolves are werewolves, but it's one way. There is no that you don't get to transform back and forth between like, I'm a wolf. Nope, now I'm normal. No, it's like once you go wolf, you don't go back. They have the Canis Helix is a genetic mutation they have, and has kept them from mostly having successor chapters, although I believe they have the Wolf Spear now. They are actually, like, with the advent of Primaris, they are actually able to have a couple of successor chapters, but it's not common.
And even in the codex or supplement, it does say that, yeah, they can have successor chapters now.
Those Space Wolves where the Canis Helix goes into overdrive become something called the Wolfen, which are basically large, like wolf-like humanoids who are still kind of in Space Wolf armor. Originally, the Space Wolves were split into a number of great companies, and they had 13 great companies because that's always the lucky number and the best way to do things.
100%.
Yep, and that 13th company got lost in the Eye of Terror, chasing down the forces of chaos. And they were gone, as you do, and they were gone for a very long time. And eventually, during the attack on Fenris, their home planet, by the Thousand Sons, with whom they have a lot of beef, and we will talk about that when we get to the Thousand Sons, because it is important, but for this point, that it's not as important that it's the Thousand Sons, but basically, so the forces of the Space Wolves were in a very dire predicament as they were under attack, and the Wolf returned to them. The 13th company returned, and they had mutated, and it turns out that kind of was not an uncommon occurrence among the Space Wolves, and it's been happening a bit more from what I understand, because it's not just the Wolfen that arrived from the 13th Great Company now. There's also rumors that the wolves on Fenris may actually be mutated Space Wolves entirely who just went full wolf. That is, I think, still kind of apocryphal. But that, again, the running joke is there are no wolves on Fenris. What happened to their Primarch? We don't exactly know. He left to go fight the forces of chaos. I think he also supposedly went into the Eye of Terror, but he promised his children, one day the wolf time will come when it is time for the final battle, and I will come back to you. Still not spotted, so we're not at the end yet. Good to know. They have probably the most unique units. Like the Blood Angels have a few units, like they've got the Death Company, and they have their Sanguinary Guard, and they have like Sanguinary Priests, which are basically their apothecaries, who are like their chief medics. They have their own thing. The Dark Angels have a couple of special Ravenwing units, like the Ravenwing Knights. They have Deathwing Knights. They have a couple of Landspeeder designs that are unique to them. But again, for the most part, they mostly use Space Marine units. The Space Wolves kind of do their own thing entirely. They can have access to the regular Space Marine units. They totally can use them, but they have the Blood Claws, which are their young, impetuous melee fighters. They have the Grey Hunters, which are the more middle-aged, seasoned dad bod kind of soldiers. And then they have the Wolf Scouts and the Long Fangs, which are their veterans. They have the Head Takers, which are like their own like Terminator veteran monster hunters and character hunters. They have their own. They used to have their own vehicles. Now they mostly they have the Wolfen. They have their own Wolfen dreadnoughts. They even have a named one named Murderfang. They have the oldest Space Marine in current existence with Bjorn the Fell-Handed, who is also a dreadnought now. They do have a lot of their own units to fill the roles that other chapters just use with standard Codex Marines.
They used to have that for every role, but with the Primaris influx, they've lost a lot of their, I guess, first founding style, generic, old, non-Primaris Space Marines. So they're changing, and because, I guess, of the Primaris, their unique units are definitely unique to them. But for like a lot of the other things like jump or bikes or anything like that, that's going to lean onto the Primaris ones.
Right. And their detachments are based on Viking-style heroic sagas of, like, you know, being able to tell stories of great feats. And so they have 3 from their supplement. The Saga of the Hunter, which focuses on Space Wolf units, killing units in melee, and that gets them to, basically, they get quarry points, which then, once they hit a certain threshold of quarry points, it unlocks special abilities. However, it only applies to units that are Space Wolf units. And this has been one of the issues I've had with how supplemental codexes have been done. All these things we've talked about in this half of the episode with like the Blood Angels and the Dark Angels, only the characters and units that are specific to those supplements have the Blood Angels or Dark Angels keyword, or in this case, the Space Wolves keyword. Now, most of the time that doesn't matter. It just, the only thing where it matters is, hey, if you have any units that have one of those keywords, you don't get access to the extra bit, the +1 to wound from Oath of Moment. Or if you're using a detachment that isn't considered a generic Space Marine detachment. Because there was an issue where you could be running Blood Angels and using a Blood Angels detachment, but not using any Blood Angels specific characters or units, and get the best of both worlds. You'd get the Blood Angels detachment abilities, but you'd also get the extra +1 to wound. So they fixed that by saying, well, it can't have any of the keywords and it can't be from a supplemental codex. But none of the units that you take gain the Blood Angels keyword. They're still considered generic. Well, in the Space Wolves codex, that's still true, but the detachments don't work for anything that doesn't have the Space Wolf keyword, which means you're kind of locked into using their special units for at least 2 of these detachments.
And I think that hits me really hard because I have a lot of Terminators for the Space Wolves. But with the new supplement, I couldn't use any of the old Terminators because they're in the Space Marine book. I mean, I could, but I didn't get any benefits for using them.
Right.
And so that kind of really bummed me out because now I'm like limited to just one version of Terminators as opposed to having all of the different types that the Space Marine main codex has. So I was sad.
Yeah. And, you know, yes, you do have a number of units that you can like work with it, and you've got access to like Thunderwolf Cavalry, which is Space Wolves riding giant wolves, and you have access to the Blood Claws and Grey Hunters and things like that. But it does really limit which units can benefit and help you build up your, like, for example, the quarry points. You don't, like, if you just took a unit of Assault Intercessors, which are just a close combat Space Marine unit, and killed a unit in combat, it doesn't do anything for you. It would have to be a unit of Blood Claws or Grey Hunters or something like that to get the bonus. So that's a bit of an issue with Space Wolves and how they work. The next detachment is Saga of the Bold, which is focused on characters doing heroic acts and doing, like, killing certain things and doing certain tasks. And if once you do like so many of them, it unlocks the saga and you get more bonuses. But again, it has to be Space Wolf characters, which means if you have a generic librarian or a generic captain or a generic lieutenant, those don't count. So again, it limits what units you can use in that case. Then there's the Saga of the Beast Slayer, which is good because it doesn't have that limitation. It is focused on using like Thunderwolf Cavalry and Wolfen as far as like what stratagems they have. But the rules just say if any of your Space Marine units kill characters, monsters, vehicles, that helps towards your saga. So it's the one that is like the most open as far as the Space Wolves from their supplement.
It's kind of become the de facto one that most Space Wolf players have been using.
Yep.
And also just because it's melee focused, another, I guess, thing I was talking to you guys about ahead of time was Blood Claws. This detachment works for them. They've got like 4 attacks each, and you can take them in a squad of 20, and they get better at killing big things. Yeah, I've seen knights and Tyranid monsters go down like paper in front of a huge squad of angry Blood Claws.
Oh, yeah. weight and numbers will do a lot. And yeah, it's like once you kill a certain number of like characters, monsters, or vehicles, there's basically half of your opponent's characters, monsters, or vehicles. Against characters, monsters, or vehicles, you have lethal hits. You get lethal hits against everything once you unlock the saga.
But the biggest thing is getting the lethal hits on all the big things that...
Yeah.
Because then you don't have to do the wound roll. And since you're only like 4 strength for a lot of your melee weapons, your lethal hits will bypass all that to make sure all that damage you're doing sticking.
Right. So yeah, it's like you can throw a whole bunch of bodies at pretty much anything and get a lot of work done with that detachment. Yeah, I can see why that's become the standard. And then finally they have the Champions of Fenris, which was their Grotmus detachment, which gives like their infantry and walkers the opportunity to do like heroic interventions, out of turn charges if somebody's within like 3 inches and you're not engaged with them. It's fine, but that's not what most people are using either. And that gets us through our founding 9 chapters, but there's still 2 more. One of them is a successor chapter, specifically successors of the Iron Fists, the Black Templars. Their Primarch would be Rogaldorn, and they hold him in holy reverence. And in fact, they consider that Reboot Gilliman is, yes, he's a demigod, and yes, he's back, and he's technically running the Imperium, but he's still kind of a jerk and a heretic, and we don't have to listen to him. Basically, at the end of the Horus Heresy, one of the highest, probably the highest ranked veteran of the Imperial Fists, the Emperor's champion himself, Sigismund, whose personal heraldry was a Black Templar cross, was given his own chapter because at first Rogaldorn did not want to split his legion into chapters because his legion had been beaten up really badly during the defense of the Imperial Palace, and Reboot Gilliman's Ultramarines had just shown up at the very end because they'd been delayed by warp storms. And basically it's like, you can't tell me to divvy up my forces. My forces are almost completely worn out. So Gilliman said, okay, fine, you can split it into 3 instead of like, as long as you can split it into 3, we're good. And one of those 3 was given to Sigismund, who named his chapter the Black Templars and decided, well, the Emperor never told us to stop crusading. And the Emperor is a god, even though no one else is supposed to worship him as a god, because that's what got the word bearers in trouble. We mentioned that earlier. But the Emperor is a god, and God told us to go on crusade forever. He didn't tell us to stop. So we're just going to go crusade against all the threats of the Imperium. And that's what they did. So you have a bunch of religiously zealous Marines who believe in internal crusades going against what they consider to be the enemies of humanity, which is basically anything that isn't human or holy enough to qualify. These are based off of like medieval era crusading knights. So like early medieval, going down to Jerusalem, like with the, their armor is done in Crusader style armor. They discovered the Land Raider Crusader. Like they are the prototypical crusading knight. They are also absolutely terrible as far as people. We mentioned that the Salamanders, go out of their way to save civilians. The Black Templars not only don't care about civilians, if you were attacked by chaos and you survived, you obviously did not fight hard enough, and therefore they have to put you to the sword. It's nothing personal, except it might be entirely personal, but they are obsessed with religious purity, and they are uncompromising to a fault. They are probably the least heroic of the various Space Marine chapters. I mean, they're combat monsters, and much, they, like the Blood Angels, they are a close combat oriented force. Or unlike the Blood Angels, they are more focused on just throwing waves of bodies at things. In fact, one of their key squads is the Crusader Squad, which is basically, what if we gave every Space Marine a squire who is also a Space Marine, and we run them in blocks of 20. We put chaplains with them to work them up into a fervor, and we just point them at things and let them beat them to death. And that's basically the Black Templars. They do not have Oaths of Moment. They are the only faction we are going to discuss today that has basically foregone the Oath of Moment ability. Instead, they have Templar vows, which basically at the beginning of the game, you pick one of 4 vows, and that's the ability you have for the rest of the game. Whether they are good enough trade-offs for Oath of Moment, not all of them are. They are not all made equally. But just know that if you are playing Black Templars, you are going to be playing a very different kind of army, because you don't get Oath of Moment, you don't get Psychers, because the Black Templars hate anything of the warp, and so they hate Psychers, so they refuse to use Librarians. You cannot use the First Company Task Force detachment because it is built on Oath of Moment. You cannot include a number of units because the Black Templars have their own variations of the vehicles. So there's a lot of vehicles you can't take, a lot of tanks. You also can't take generic Terminators. You can't take generic Stern Guard veterans because you have to use the Black Templar variations of them.
Okay. I mean, listening to this, I really still don't understand why they put Black Templars into the Space Marine Codex, so to speak, because they are so different. I mean, I said the others are slightly different. Blood Angels and Dark Angels are slightly different. Space Wolves are really different. But Black Templars, even with especially with losing Oath or not having Oath a moment, they play like a different army altogether.
They do. And one of the reasons why you can't take Stern Guard vets or Terminator squads is because those units in the Space Marine Codex key off of Oath of Moment. So they had to make new versions of them for the Black Templars.
Yeah.
It's like, you can run Black Templars with more generic intercessors and things like that. Whether that fits or not is debatable. You can run an army entirely with Black Templars units, but you do want to have access to generic chaplains. You may want some shooty units, or intercessors are not bad, aggressors are not bad. There are certain things where it's there are units that fit the Black Templar playstyle in the Space Marine Codex that they do have access to, but it is definitely the most divergent chapter as far as playstyle. So many of the rules just don't work. As far as detachments, they have 4, 1 Grotmus and 3 regular. So they have the Companions of Vehemence, which basically gives you reroll and advance and charge rolls, because again, this is a close combat force. They want to get up there and get fighting, and a lot of their stratagems benefit you from having chaplains. You've got the Vindication Task Force, which is a weird one where it plays off of having Ancients, which are banner carriers, and Crusade squads, and moving on to objectives and trying to hold objectives. They get they're Ancients, and an ancient unit is any unit that has a banner carrier attached to it, because you share keywords. So anytime you have an ancient unit on an objective, then they get transhuman physiology. They're harder to shift off of objectives, and their Crusader squads have the ability that when they get shot, they can get a free movement towards whatever shot them. In this detachment, they can run towards objectives instead. So it's basically trying to mob objectives with holy banners. There's the Godhammer Assault Force, which is focused entirely on fighting after disembarking from transports, because they have the Land Raider Crusader, which it holds 16 people and lets you charge after getting out after it moved. So it's all built around that. And then there's the Wrathful Procession, which is their Grotmus detachment, where you have a number of buffs that you can choose. You select one every round, and it's kind of more generic. And it came out before the Codex was out, so that was before the Black Templars were really as weird and different as they are now. But it's not a bad detachment to play. It's just fluff wise, they are not good guys in any, just because somebody's on the Imperium side does not make them heroes. These are probably the least heroic of them all. But if you like just charging masses of crusading knights at people, this is probably the way to go. And then finally, our last chapter is not a chapter at all. It is a conglomeration of chapters, because we will get into this in a later episode. I want to cover the rest of the Imperium last, because too many times the Imperium gets covered and then everything else is an afterthought. And while I did want to start with Space Marines because it's what it's what people will be most familiar with, I want to save the Imperium for the end after we've outlined all the threats to the Imperium. But for this faction, it's a little bit important to know that when the Imperium is fighting threats that are not chaos based, but are rather from different alien races, they have a group called the Ordo Xenos, which is part of the Imperial Inquisition, which tries to root out threats from alien species and then send forces to answer those threats who are specialized in fighting aliens. And so various chapters will send representatives to join the Ordo Xenos and become members of what is known as the Death Watch. And so the Death Watch is kind of like, think Men in Black, the best of the best of the best with honors. And so often you'll see them modeled with shoulder pads. Like one shoulder pad will be whatever their chapter is. And you could have a squad that has like members of all different chapters, including a lot of like successor chapters and chapters, that are not covered in the main rules. And then their other will be the bright silver Deathwatch shoulder pad, which will have like special etching on all of them. And they'll have one arm. They're all in black armor, but one arm is silver. The Deathwatch is what Captain Titus, then Lieutenant Titus, and then eventually Captain Titus again, joined after he felt that he had failed the Ultramarines, and he became known as what was a Black Shield, where he was hiding his identity out of shame. But it's also a place where, hey, if you want to serve the Imperium, but if you feel like you failed your chapter, you can go serve with the Death Watch and learn to and fight the enemies of the Imperium. The Death Watch, because they are made of members of different chapters, the idea is they take the best of the fighting styles of all these different chapters and all these different techniques, and they combine them into focused kill teams, groups that are specialized to handle particular kinds of threats. And so rather than following traditional organizational structures, they will basically be these spec ops forces that's like, oh, we need to fight something really tough. We're going to send down guys in like Terminator or Gravis style armor. Oh, we need a stealth group. We're going to take like some snipers and some infiltrators and kind of mix that together, and we'll drop that down as a squad. Or we just need some generic Marine type bodies with a variety of weapons. Well, we'll take a couple of guys with bolters and a couple of guys with plasma guns and maybe a guy with a missile launcher and a guy with a flamethrower, which is kind of a throwback to the way Space Marine squads used to be built. But this is even more specialized than those were. And because of this, you have access to these interesting, weird mixed Marine squads where you can take models from like a whole bunch of different units and kits and combine them into single units, which also makes this one of the more expensive armies if you're starting from scratch, because you'll have to buy all these different box sets to get like 2 guys from here and 1 guy from here and 2 guys from here. But they are also have some really neat rules. They're also the only faction where you do not have to buy your supplemental codex. You can build these with the Space Marine Codex and the free download for the faction pack Deathwatch, which is available on the Warhammer community website. They do have access to almost everything that's in the Space Marine Codex. I think there are some things they do not have. You can't take any of the really old squads. You can't take like assault squads, jump pack assault squads, attack bike squads, devastators, land speeder storms, Terminator squads, like the generic ones, the generic scout squads. But and they do have their own Terminator squad. So you can take Terminators. They're just their particular version.
Which are better.
Yeah, they have veterans, but they also have a lot of specific kill teams that are built out of kits that basically like, hey, everybody in this team has access to jump packs. Everybody in this team has access to Gravis armor. Everybody in this team is in Phobos armor, so they're the stealthy ones. Everybody in this team has standard like Space Marine armor, so they're the Fortis kill team. Every team has its own special abilities. They are the most customizable as far as styles of weaponry. They also added a new kill team to them, and the Decimus kill team, which is based off of the new Deathwatch kill team box for that game, which itself can mix Phobos and Gravis and like Tacticus armor. And so they've got like, you can tailor your force with Deathwatch to basically be anything you need it to be to face the kind of threats that you think you're going to face. Also, because they have a very consistent painting scheme of black armor, silver arm, they're kind of easy to paint, but you also have a lot of flexibility on, hey, you can do all these different shoulder pads. And so you don't have to lean into like one Marine force. You could have all the Marine forces if you want.
This is why I collect Death Watch, because I like collecting all of the Marines.
Yeah. They only have one detachment, which is the Black Spear Task Force, which focuses on mission tactics. You basically have a list of three mission tactics you can pick once per battle, and each one gives all your Space Marines a special ability. So it's either sustained hits, lethal hits, precision. You still have access to Oath of Moment. You didn't give that up. And you have stratagems that give you like special ammunition that you can use, and also give you access to some teleport uppy downy shenanigans. Now, they are better if you're using kill team units, but they do work. Some of them do work for non-kill team units as well. The ammo is for kill teams only. But really in this army, I don't think there's much benefit to not running kill teams. Like the kill teams are generally the way to go because you'll get the most out of your army that way. And again, it allows you to mix and match. You can buy like spare Marine bodies off of eBay and like slowly assemble a Death Watch army. I have the spare parts. I'm going to be working on a 1,000-point Death Watch army over the next few months, just because it's like, well, I got the parts for it. I might as well. The only thing you really have to buy if you want is they have upgrade sprues that are just all the special shoulder, like the silver Death Watch shoulder pads. But other than that, like it's Space Marines plus shoulder pad, and it lets you build a very flexible force. And it was a force that people thought were going to be squatted or, removed from the game because they weren't going to get a print codex. And then Games Workshop was like, okay, so we understand you want to play these. And when the Imperial Agents Codex, which is something we'll talk about when we get to our Imperium episode, Death Watch were kind of relegated to, there's one Death Watch unit, and that's all you'll ever get. You get one squad of veterans, one kill team there, that's all you're going to get. And Death Watch players were like, but I have an army that I made of these guys. I would like to play them. And Games Workshop was like, you're right. We did let you make armies of that. It would be kind of jerks of us to take them away. So here, you can have them back and for free. And everyone was happy.
And then they started winning tournaments
they've done very well in tournaments because they're also good at dealing with all kinds of threats, because you can build a force that has access to all the tools you need to deal with any kind of threat. And you have access to teleporter shenanigans, which lets you play uppy downy and get onto objectives and score secondary points. And they're just a very conveniently built army for winning tournaments. But yeah, that is the last one of the armies that can be built from the Space Marine Codex. And I think it says something that we've talked about effectively 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like we've talked about like 10, 11 different kinds of armies, all based off of one book effectively, which just, again, that's how well-rounded all-comer the Space Marine faction, collective faction is, that you can do kind of anything. And it's just when you start getting further afield of what is a Space Marine army, like you get to Space Wolves and Black Templars, things get a little bit weird and it doesn't gel quite as well. But it's still those are still considered Space Marine armies. This is kind of like if you are wanting to play the Emperor's Angels of Death, there's a lot of different flavors you can play, and all of them are going to be pretty good at doing whatever you need them to do.
And I think just the variety is a testament to how iconic and popular the faction is, the models are. It is far and away the biggest model range. The most special units, some of the cooler units. So there's definitely a reason why this is most people's entry point into the game.
Yeah. Now that's definitely not everybody's entry point. Not everybody's going to want to play big blue guys or whatever color you paint your guys. Big guys in power armor. Maybe that's not your thing, or maybe you want something more elite. Or maybe you don't want to play the good guys, or maybe you want to play a cool looking alien. Well, we'll be talking about those options in further faction focus episodes. In fact, our next faction focus will be talking about the other half of the Space Marines from the Horus Heresy. We will be talking about the Forces of Chaos, as well as the demons and other war machines that are considered part of the Chaos armies as well.
The real good guys of the setting.
And no. I'm gonna go with a hard no on that one. Like, while the Space Marines are questionable at best outside of maybe the Salamanders on whether they're good guys or not, the Forces of Chaos definitely not. But that's a discussion for next episode. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks with our faction focus Chaos. But until then, from all of us here at Preferred Enemies, I'm your host, Rob.
Kevin.
Dennis.
And Richard.
Good night, good gaming, and remember, just because you're on the Imperium doesn't make you the good guy.